Hi, welcome to the Stories Beside channel. Enjoy watching. Amelia, eyes flashing furiously, carefully traced the outline of her lips with a pencil. Each time she failed, she stared at herself for a few seconds, then carefully wiped the pencil from her lips and tried again. After the fifth time, she got it just the way she wanted. With a sigh, she put the pencil away and picked up her lipstick and put on some lipstick. She looked carefully at her reflection, then muttered, "Damn you." After a few seconds, she threw the lipstick as hard as she could across the room with a furious groan. The cap flew off under the bed, and the tube was left lying on the floor, glistening red in its contents. Amelia stared at it for a few minutes, then groaned. No, this was just unbearable. She covered her face with her hands and leaned on her dressing table. She sat shaking her head slightly for a while. And then she took a deep breath. "Amelia, pull yourself together. You act like you're a brainless teenager, and you're 22 years old now." Quietly, she said. She sighed again and pulled her hands away from her face. Looking at herself in the mirror, she grimaced bitterly. "Aren't I pretty without it? Who am I doing my makeup for? For Jacob. Let him see me for who I am. I'll wipe it off." Amelia took the wet wipes out of the tutu and began to scrub the lipstick thoroughly. Then she hesitated for a few seconds and wiped her whole face with them. After a few minutes, she looked at herself with satisfaction. "That's great. That's the way to go. And I don't care what anyone thinks of me. Maybe they'll realize this is my way of protesting against all this." The tattooed eyebrows stood out on her pale face, and her eyelashes were long. She didn't need mascara. She looked a little sickly, young, but very pretty, delicate. Only there was anger in her eyes, and that anger kept her from seeing her beauty. Amelia thought she looked very intimidating now. She knew in her heart that her appearance would no longer repel Jacob, for he had seen her almost without makeup. But it was worth a try. She wondered if he'd give up, because he'd see that she wouldn't give her consent this time. Maybe he will. "I don't think our fathers will." "It's okay, I'll think of something anyway. Otherwise, it won't be me." "You're ready." Amelia heard her at the door. She looked contemptuously at the door. Oh, how she wished she hadn't answered. But what would it change? Nothing. If she had to, he would drag her. She had no doubt he would. It was indecent not to come to a dinner engagement. Her reluctance was not a secular reason for not attending. "Ready in 2 minutes. I'll be downstairs." "Cold," she answered. Footsteps were heard. Her father was coming downstairs. Amelia took another look at herself in the mirror. She should have worn a simpler dress. But it was too late. There was no time to change. She would only spend half an hour looking for a new outfit to find an easier one. But a different hairstyle could be done in a minute. She quickly gathered her clean curls into a tight high ponytail. Then she made a doozy. That would be perfect. And then dark glasses. And it'll be super good. She looks like a widow who just buried her husband. That's hilarious. If her friend Emily could see her right now, she'd be shocked that Amelia is going to the most expensive restaurant in town dressed like that. She grabbed her bag and went downstairs to her father's house. Dylan looked at Amelia carefully and frowned. She looked at him with her head held high with defiance. "Is this the type of protest? And that you think we're staying home just because you haven't tidied yourself up? You're wrong. We're going to the restaurant right now. It's your choice. How do I look? I don't care. Even if you're covered in mud, we'll still be there for dinner. Let's go." And he rushed to the exit, and Amelia, her lips pressed together and clutching her purse, followed him. They rode in the car in silence. The driver kept glancing at them in the mirror, bewildered. Usually they talked a lot, but here they turned their heads away from each other. They both looked displeased. Amelia thought that once again she was trying to get her way, but it didn't work with her father. He was like an iron wall. You can't prove anything to him, and you can't compromise. He just won't let up. And how many times she's told him she doesn't like Jacob, it's no use. He's got one answer. "You don't like it now, and then you'll get used to it." Well, yes, At first she was flattered by his attention. He had been flirting around her for almost a year, and Amelia flirted with him. She went on dates with him. She even flew with him once to Europe for a vacation, and everything was great. But it wasn't until her father told her that she had to marry him. That was 3 months ago, and it all went downhill. "I don't want to marry him, Dad." "Why do you say that?" "It's like my opinion doesn't matter to me." "What are we, in the Middle Ages? What else are you making up?" "No, we're not." But her father listened calmly enough after her angry tirade. He said quietly, "Sweetheart, cool down first, and then we'll talk to you. Jacob's father and I have already discussed everything. We are both fine with this marriage. Jacob has always liked you. He likes it that way. So it's just a matter of deciding when the wedding is." Amelia was furious. "It's just a matter of deciding when the gala is. I mean, nobody's going to ask me, and I don't have to propose. Fine, I'm just a commodity to you." "Father, how on earth did you get to this point?" "Of course he will propose to you, and you will accept it, dear," Dylan answered then. Amelia looked out the window and sighed. Her father glanced at her, then looked away again. Dylan was sure he would get his way. He always gets his way, and Amelia would have to give in to him. She would realize later that he wanted her to be happy. Yes, of course, he doesn't forget about business either. Naturally, this marriage was very profitable for him. He had had quite a successful business relationship with David for a long time, but his partner had been saying he wanted to retire from the business. That's when Dylan came up with the idea of marrying their only heirs. If Jacob married Amelia, David would have no choice. The business would become a family business, and Jacob would take his father's place later. And he's not a bad guy either. And Dylan is on good terms with him. This marriage is very profitable. Except that Amelia hasn't yet realized that there will be a lot of upside for her too. And Dylan listed them all for her at first. But her daughter didn't want to hear about any of them. She only talked about one thing. She didn't want to marry Jacob, that's all. Dylan frowned. He remembered the scene his daughter had made 2 months ago. That was when Jacob had proposed to her and Amelia. With a sweet smile on her face and a sweet voice, she had turned him down. And this was a great surprise to Jacob. He thought that the girl had long since understood what his advances and expensive gifts were leading to. She had made it clear to him that his candidacy for husband was not even considered. Oh, how embarrassing it was for Dylan to face David then. His daughter shouldn't have embarrassed him like that. When David called him and told him that Amelia had made it clear to Jacob that marriage between them was impossible, Dylan was tearing up and tearing down. He apologized to David and said that there had been a small misunderstanding. "She's not such a small partner, but I won't make such a big deal out of it. I know how stubborn children can be sometimes. But my advice to you is to tame your daughter. I realize she grew up without a mother and you were too soft on her. Well, really, look where it got her." Of course, Dylan knew that her mother's absence would take its toll at some point, but he didn't think it would. Hannah would be able to talk his daughter into it. He was sure, but Hannah hadn't been with him for very many years. And now it was his job to try to get her to obey him himself. For that he needed all the stamina he had. When the car stopped outside Amelia's restaurant, the first one got out without waiting for her father to come out and give her a hand. Dylan realized that his daughter was belligerent. Well, he would do the same. "Wait," he said, as Amelia rushed toward the entrance of the restaurant. The girl stopped and looked at her father defiantly. "I understand that you don't like all this, but believe me, it's better this way when you accept his proposal. You'll be well provided for the rest of your life, and you won't have to worry about anything. It's better for all of us. You won't embarrass me in front of everybody." "That's right. You wouldn't do that. You know what will happen if you say no again." Amelia looked at her father. Her face didn't express anything. "Yes, I understand," she answered. Dylan smiled. "Well, that's a clever girl. I'm glad we understand each other. Let's go then." At a table in the VIP area, Jacob and his father David were already sitting. When Amelia saw them, she realized that her appearance would certainly perplex them, but would not change their intentions. She felt foolish. "Hi, aren't you feeling well today? You look pale, don't you, darling?" David asked, taking her hand. Amelia smiled slightly, but the smile was strained. "I haven't been well this morning. I feel better now." When did she sit down? Jacob leaned toward her. "And I think you look just fine." "So would eat you up," he said. Amelia felt like she was going to throw up. Why had she come here? She had only one intention of publicly rejecting Jacob's proposal, thereby embarrassing her father, who had assured David that his daughter had agreed to the wedding. But where would that lead? She didn't think about it. Her father would never forgive her for public shame. That's for sure. And if her relationship with David were to deteriorate because of it, and why should she care? Let them handle it. They made the mess. Let them clean it up. They've had their dinner. Amelia had a small bite in her throat, but she picked at every dish and pretended to eat. Dinner was a distracted conversation in which Amelia hardly participated, no matter how much her father tried to draw her into the conversation. The girl kept waiting for the very moment when Jacob would ask for her hand again. Dylan could see that his daughter was tense. Finally, the waiter brought a bottle of expensive champagne and 4 glasses. He placed it all on the table. Amelia realized that the moment had arrived. Jacob was about to make a speech, but she was wrong. David stood up and coughed. "My dear son and Amelia, we are gathered here today for a very important occasion. I will not bore you long. Let me tell you right away that I value each of you, and I am very pleased that our relationship can grow into a more intimate one. I have the utmost respect for you, Dylan, and I'm glad it's mutual. I hope we can continue to be on that same level. Jacob supports me, and I think it's no secret that our relationship has its benefits for him as well. So it gives me great pleasure to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage for my son Jacob." Amelia was numb. There was no way she was expecting this. She knew that everyone here knew why they were here, but she thought Jacob would be asking for her hand. To him, she could refuse. But no one was asking her at the moment. David wasn't even looking at her, and Jacob wasn't looking at her. Everyone was looking at her father. No one was going to consider her opinion. It was as if the meeting and the conversation were a pure formality, as if everything had been decided long ago. And Dylan smiled as he looked at his partner. He was glad it had worked out that way, and he would now gladly respond to their offer with consent. He too stood up and said with a smile to David, "Do you know how much I enjoy working with you? And I'm glad there's an opportunity to further cement our relationship, not just on paper, but with a bond of kinship. And I gladly accept your offer, and I give your son my only daughter, Amelia." There was a sharp sound that made Amelia shudder. It was Jacob himself opening a bottle of champagne and beginning to pour the boiling liquor into a glass. Amelia shifted her gaze from one to the other. They were all so excited, as if a good deal had now been done. Jacob blushed with joy. David grinned contentedly, shaking her father's hand. And her father was just glowing all over in part. Everything had worked out just the way he planned. And no one even asked her. There had been a bidding war. She was sold like a commodity, and it was a bargain for everyone but her. She was the victim. No one even looked at her. The men were talking among themselves, patting each other on the shoulder. Jacob looked smugly at his father. He was proud that he had succeeded, and Amelia would be a major trophy in his succession of life's victories. Amelia felt such a wave of anger rising inside that she might now explode with indignation. She realized that it was either now or never. If she doesn't speak now, she can't change anything. Everyone will continue to push her around and boss her around, and she will forever voluntarily forbid herself in a golden cage. And she will live with an unloved man who will never make her happy. Jacob held out a glass of champagne to her. Everyone was already holding their glasses. She was the only one left. Amelia stared at the glass, eyeing the bubbles rising from the bottom up. Yes, now was the moment when she could at least do something. No, Dylan frowned at his daughter. David threw his gaze at her in bewilderment. Jacob, still smiling, still held out his glass to her. What no, my dear? Jacob's father asked Amelia. Amelia mustered her courage and looked at David and said, No, I will not marry your son. There was silence. The smile faded from Jacob's face, and he looked at his father fearfully. Dylan looked angrily at his daughter. What do you mean you won't get married? Jacob's father asked again. Amelia felt her lips dry with excitement. She licked them. It means I don't want to marry Jacob. And I won't. I didn't give my consent to this marriage, and I never will. So I see no reason to celebrate. David frowned and looked at Dylan. Amelia finally looked into her father's eyes. She got goosebumps from the look in his eyes. She knew she was in for a huge scandal. She had never crossed her father in public, and she was embarrassing him now with her disobedience. But she could not bear to have her own fate decided for her. What does that mean, Dylan? Coldly, David said. Dylan took his eyes off his daughter and looked at his partner. I am very sorry. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I didn't take care of it. I should have listened to your advice, David. But I intend to get it sorted out as soon as possible. Please excuse us. We need to talk to our daughter alone. Unfortunately, our celebration will have to be postponed. I'm sure the situation will be resolved quickly. I assure you, I intend to resolve it very quickly. Please stand up and follow me. Amelia got up silently and followed her father. She realized that never before had her father been so angry. She had really pissed him off. In the car, they drove in silence. But she could feel the waves of anger coming from her father. She could feel it physically, and she felt uncomfortable. When they arrived, her father grabbed her by the arm, squeezed her painfully, and dragged her into his office. Amelia could barely hold back tears of resentment and fear. When they were in the study, her father pushed her into a chair and closed the door himself. Then he walked over to her with his hands, took hold of the armrests, and almost growled. What are you doing? How dare you behave like this? What right have you to disgrace me like this? Amelia said with trembling lips. What are you doing? How dare you answer for me? What right do you have to decide my fate for me? Dylan roared and slammed his fists into the armrest of his chair with force. God, you're completely out of control. What makes you so stubbornly disobedient? What makes you think I should be obedient, controlled? I'm not 5 years old or even 10. I'm a big girl, and I don't want to be led around by you. I want to be in charge of my own life. Dylan laughed unpleasantly. His laughter was not sincere. He acted that way on purpose to humiliate Amelia. Oh, is that how it is? You're all grown up and independent. Then why aren't you going to work? Why are you sitting on my neck, spending my money, living in my house? Can't you support yourself then, if you are so independent? Amelia almost choked. She looked at her father in silence. That you have nothing to say. Why didn't you say anything when it came to money? I know why. Because you're nothing, and no one will marry you without money. Look, my dear, you're going to get your stubbornness in my bones, and I'll tell you this. Either you marry Jacob, or you can pack your things and get the hell out of here. I'm giving you one last chance. You have 1 week to think about it. Then do me a favor and make a final choice. Now that you know the consequences of your choices, you won't have a chance to change them. I'm done talking. Now go to your room and think about it. Tomorrow is the countdown from now on. Get out of my sight. I can't look at you. My mother would never do that to me. She would have listened to my wish and not let you do anything I didn't want to do. Dylan looked at his daughter and then quietly, coldly, said, Your mother is dead. She is not with us. Amelia couldn't say anything out of resentment. She stared at her father, who was staring out the window, for a while longer, and then she jumped up abruptly and ran to her room. Only when she locked the door to her room could she let the tears flow. Why was her father acting this way? Doesn't he love her? Doesn't he want her to be happy? Doesn't he understand that she doesn't love Jacob? Does she want to meet her love? Yes, as naive as it sounds, she believes in love. She knew her parents loved each other. After her mother died, her father had never been able to love anyone. She wanted to love someone that way too. Jacob disliked her. He did not love her. Maybe he likes her a lot, but only as a pretty toy and nothing more. Amelia groaned. Her father has put her in a desperate situation. He knows that without his provision, Amelia cannot live. She is used to not having to think about anything. And if he takes away her money, she is nothing without it. An empty place. What will she do? Would she have to marry a man she didn't love and suffer the rest of her life? No, there's no way that could happen. She would never marry Jacob. She'd rather marry the first man she meets than that pompous narcissist. Pompous, narcissistic idiot. Amelia couldn't sleep from crying, and her eyes smelled so bad she couldn't blink. She kept going over and over in her head all the possible ways out of this situation, but she couldn't think of any way to avoid the hated wedding. Only toward morning did she fall into a restless sleep. When Amelia awoke in the morning, her father was no longer at home. The girl spent about an hour cleaning herself up. At last she was starting to look acceptable enough to leave the house. She did not want to be at home. She needed freedom and fresh air, people, and society. She got dressed and went to the mall. At first she started shopping, trying to distract herself. But her mood was disgusting. She realized she was going to snap at one of the consultants who followed her around. In every boutique, she went to the cafe for coffee. Maybe she would order her favorite drink, and some helpful thoughts would come to mind. When she entered the cafe, she went straight to her favorite table by the window. But unfortunately, it was occupied. Some guy was sitting there, looking at the menu. Apparently, he had just sat down. The table had recently been empty. He hadn't ordered anything yet. Amelia was in such a bad mood that she decided to ruin it for someone else. If this guy took her favorite table, he was going to get some negativity out of her. She walked swiftly toward him, stopping beside the table. She said sternly, without even saying hello, "You took my table. I beg you to vacate it." He looked up at her carefully and looked her over from head to toe. For some reason, Amelia felt strange. The guy looked at the table and then said something I didn't see, that the table was reserved. There was no sign. His voice was pleasant, but Amelia didn't pay much attention to it. She hummed and objected, so the waiter forgot to put up the sign. "I'll complain, but that doesn't change the matter. I've always sat here, and I'll sit here now. You'll have to move to another table. There's an empty one over there. You can sit there. Can't you sit there?" The boy blushed. Did Amelia press her lips together? "No, I won't sit there. You'll sit there, and I'll sit here." "Well, are you going to vacate the chair?" The boy looked at her again carefully, then glanced in the direction of the free table. He blushed and answered, "All right, I'll move, if that's the table you need." "No, I don't need it. I just want to sit here." The guy didn't say anything back. He took his denim jacket from the table and got up and looked at Amelia again. He went to another table, and then Amelia felt herself blushing treacherously. The guy was lent. She was as embarrassed as she had ever been in her life. She wanted to hail him and tell him he could sit there. But the guy quite nimbly made his way to another table, which wasn't far away at all. She watched him sit down. He looked at her, and she immediately looked away and sat down. She could still feel the heat on her face. Amelia sat down facing the guy, but didn't look at him. A waiter came up to her, and she ordered herself a coffee and croissant. While she waited to order, she pretended to study something on her phone. In fact, she was looking at the guy sideways. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He ordered too, and then just stared out the window. His gaze was sad. At first, Amelia thought he was waiting for a girl, but when they brought him his order, she saw that he had ordered for one person. He was slowly eating chocolate ice cream with his tea. Amelia tried to take her mind off the guy she'd kicked out, but she kept involuntarily glancing at him. What was it about him that interested her so much? dressed simply. Nothing out of the ordinary about him. An expensive watch on his arm, and his phone was an old model. Amelia saw him when he took it out of his pocket for a minute. An ordinary guy, but something about him attracted her with a limp. And then Amelia wondered what a son-in-law her father should have, to know how to go against his daughter's wishes. That's the kind of regular guy she should marry, so that her father would burn with shame in front of his friends, partners, and acquaintances. And then an idea occurred to Amelia. What if she really got married to a guy like that, and then put her father before the fait accompli? There's nothing he can do about it. And she'll take his nose. She'll do everything the way she wants. And he won't be able to say another word, because she'll already be married. And that nasty Jacob will finally leave her alone. Amelia stared at the guy so intently, she didn't notice him looking at her too, without looking away. When Amelia realized that they had been just staring at each other for several minutes, she blushed again. So she decided to act. She grabbed her cup bag and walked over to the table. "I'm sorry, do you mind if I sit with you?" she said. The guy shrugged and answered, "I don't mind." "Sit down." Amelia sat down, and then said to him, "I'm sorry for the way I acted. Honestly, I was in such a crappy mood that I needed to snap at someone. Can you please forgive me for doing that? I didn't really make that reservation. Yes, I love sitting there. But if it gets busy, I just sit somewhere else. It's embarrassing. I embarrassed myself and hurt you so much." The guy smirked. "No, you didn't offend me. You just acted so weird. Honestly, I thought I was being hysterical. I thought if I didn't agree to sit down, you'd fall to the floor and scream, kicking your legs in the air, or get in my hair and scratch my face with your fingernails. So I decided I'd rather give in to you." Amelia gasped, her eyes wide. "Have I really given you that impression? How awful." The boy couldn't stand it. He laughed. "Just kidding. I'm kidding. It was nothing like that. I just saw that you were upset about something, and I didn't want to make you more upset. That's all." Amelia squinted incredulously. He really did seem quite serious. He didn't seem to be joking anymore. "I think he's serious now. Thank you. You've made me feel better. My name is Jonathan." Amelia smiled and held out her hand to him. "My name is Amelia. It's very nice to meet you." He shook her hand and replied that it was a pleasure to meet you. They got to talking. Amelia did not say much about herself. He did not ask, but she learned a lot about him. He lived on the outskirts of town with his mother and his father. He left him and his mother when Jonathan was only 6 years old. From then on, the boy became his mother's main helper. He graduated from high school somehow, but not because he was dumb. No, he was a smart kid, capable, but he didn't have much time to study. He worked hard, helping his mother by taking on manly responsibilities. He became a man early on. Life forced him into it, but he didn't complain. He just wanted to help his mother, so she wouldn't get so tired, so she wouldn't suffer so much. He didn't want to replace his father, but he wanted to be the main helper in the family, and he succeeded. When he graduated from high school, he was immediately drafted into the army. He was very worried how his mother would cope on her own, but she did. After the army, he learned to drive a tractor right away, and he became a tractor driver. He worked in the fields, in the villages. There was always work. So he has been working for more than 10 years and lives with his mother in a small, modest house. Amelia listened to him and was convinced every minute that she had never met such a simple and humble guy. Of course, she had only ever socialized with rich, ordinary guys. She didn't think of them as people. They were nothing to her. If someone had ever told her that she would sit in a cafe like that with an ordinary poor guy, she would have spat in that person's face for such an insult. And she didn't recognize herself. Now she is sitting here listening to a guy she has seen for the first time in her life, who earns as much a month as she can spend on lunch or dinner a day. And most importantly, he talks about himself without a shadow of embarrassment or shame or pride in his demeanor. He just told her honestly what he was, without embellishing anything about himself. His sincerity completely discouraged her. She was used to the fact that all the guys she had ever talked to or dated or gotten to know were from her circle, and every single one of them bragged either about their successes or the successes of their parents. They tossed around money without even knowing its true value. Amelia had been brought up a little differently. Yes, she had everything, but she knew to get something, she had to earn it. Jonathan, on the other hand, simply talked about his difficult life, not even emphasizing the fact that he spent most of his life helping his mother. For him, it was just business as usual. Amelia liked Jonathan. He could see that she was not an easy girl. Of course, he didn't know about jewelry brands or anything else, but he understood that she was of the wealthy. But he liked her too much to think about her social status. "Would you like to go to the park tomorrow for a walk?" he suggested to the girl. Amelia wanted to say that she had never just taken a walk in the park before, and Jonathan was limping badly. She had no idea what she would look like next to him. But then she thought of her father. Wonderful she would look next to Jonathan, just the way his father deserved. "Yes, I'll go to the park with you. I'd love to go." When they parted, having arranged to meet again, Amelia felt some anxiety. What was she doing? Why is she using this nice, sociable, and battered by fake guy? After all, it wasn't his fault at all that she was in a fight with her father. He was genuinely looking at her. She is trying to hurt her father by using him to get him in trouble. Her father deserves it. Jonathan doesn't. He'd been hurt enough already, but she couldn't stop now. She had to see it through, especially since she'd already agreed to a date, so to speak. It wasn't like she was going to give it back. Also, Amelia couldn't admit even to herself that she really liked this guy and wanted to meet him because she felt like a real regular girl with him. She hadn't even met her father that evening. He arrived late, shut himself in his office right away, and she was in her room until nightfall. The next day, she met Jonathan again. The time flew by. They took a little walk. At first, Amelia didn't even notice his limp. She was so interested in him. She laughed the whole time because he told her so many funny stories from his life. Most of them were not even really funny, but rather sad. But Jonathan skillfully turned everything around in his stories in such a way that it was impossible to hold back laughter. Then he paid for 2 tickets, and they rode the Ferris wheel. Then Amelia offered to eat ice cream. She saw Jonathan tense up, and she said that since he had paid for the tickets, she would treat him to ice cream. He didn't resist. As they talked, Amelia saw that he looked at her strangely, as if he was interested in something, but he didn't ask her anything. They sat on the bench for a long time, talking about everything. Amelia had never felt so easy and good, and then she called herself a cab home. She offered to give him a ride first, but he flatly refused. They arranged to meet, and the next day, Amelia returned home in high spirits. She tried not to think about what awaited her in just a couple of days. Of course, she was probably being silly and frivolous. She should be looking for a way out of her marriage. And she enjoys the company of the guy who was now constantly in her thoughts. Her father had put her in front of a choice. She was unwilling to make it. After exactly 5 days, Amelia realized that she had fallen in love with Jonathan. Yes, it was still too short a time to speak with confidence of serious feelings. But Amelia had never experienced anything like this before. New feelings consumed her, and she couldn't handle them. And then she decided to tell Jonathan the truth. She told him that she was rich, and that her father was forcing her to marry a man she did not love, and that she resisted it with all her might. But her father tries to get his way by blackmailing her, and she is very unhappy because she liked Jonathan. She said a lot of other things without even realizing what she was doing it for. The words just kept pouring out, and she kept talking and talking and talking, and Jonathan was silent the whole time. He looked at Amelia without ever interrupting her. She could see on his face that he was confused and didn't know what to say to him. When she finished her story, she sighed and said quietly, "Do you think I'm really hysterical?" Jonathan shook his head. No, I don't think so. I just think how unhappy rich people are. After all, they don't belong to themselves. They serve their wealth, which they are afraid of losing. They do everything to consolidate their position in society. They even forget that life passes so quickly. I'm sorry your father is forcing you to do things you don't want to do. I am very glad that you are trying to live your life the way you want to live it yourself. However, you probably won't have a choice anyway. It's not like you can live your life any other way. Amelia, she was very surprised at his reasoning, and she said what she had wanted to say all along just now. It was sincere. Jonathan, I want you to meet your father. I really like you, and I want to prove to him that I don't need that marriage at all. I want to prove to him that I have met a good man who is worthy to be my friend to begin with. Maybe he'll change his mind when he gets to know you. Talk to you. I don't want to ruin my relationship with him. I want to prove to him that I won't be happy with someone I don't love. And I want a totally different person. Maybe he'll understand that when he sees how we communicate. Please don't say no to me. Unless it's just you. Maybe you're afraid to meet my father. I won't blame you. It's your right. But if you help me, I'll be very happy. And Jonathan agreed, partly to prove to the rich man that there are many decent people among the poor, partly because he liked Amelia very much, and he just couldn't break up with her. They would inevitably break up if her father forced her to marry. Until tomorrow then, with a smile, she asked. But Jonathan shook his head. Why wait for tomorrow? Let's do it tonight. I'm ready to meet her now. How would you like that? Amelia didn't expect it to happen so quickly. But maybe Jonathan was right. She didn't have to put off her death. She called a cab, and they drove to her house. When they pulled up in front of the house, Amelia saw the light in her father's office. So he was home. Great. The moment of truth had arrived. They entered the house. Jonathan was stunned by the splendor that surrounded him. He had never imagined that Amelia was so rich. Now he slightly regretted that he had agreed to meet her. It was unlikely that such a wealthy man would listen to his daughter's claims. With such wealth, people get used to having their every whim and desire fulfilled without question. Most likely, Amelia will not be able to change anything. She is part of this system, and she will never break free in her life. Are you ready? Amelia whispered. I'm ready. And they walked to Dylan's office. When Amelia gently knocked on the door, there was a loud voice. Come in, and they both looked at each other. Amelia opened the door. Her father was sitting at the table, with his head low at work. Amelia and Jonathan looked at each other. Then Amelia said, Hi, Dad. Dylan answered affably. Hi, daughter, Daddy. There's someone I want you to meet. Dylan immediately looked up. He had a perplexed look on his face. When he heard his daughter's calm voice as she said hello to him, he thought she was resigned to her fate. But when he saw that she had brought someone to him, he sensed trouble approaching. Daddy, meet Jonathan, my friend. Jonathan said hello to him. Dylan was quiet for a moment, and then he looked at his daughter and said, What are you up to? Amelia swallowed a lump in her throat. Daddy, I want you to talk to Jonathan. Dylan took one more look at the boy, greeted him sparingly, and then said, Young man, I really need to talk to my daughter alone right now. Would you be so kind as to leave us alone? You can wait in the hall while we finish talking. No, Jonathan, will you stay here? Said Amelia, looking at the boy. But Jonathan didn't look at her. He and Amelia's father kept their eyes on each other. Then Jonathan nodded and walked out of the office. Dylan saw that the boy was limping and frowned even more. As Jonathan walked out the door, Dylan looked at his daughter. I take it that you're trying to embarrass me further. Did Amelia bring someone into the house? You know, sometimes I get the impression you're not my daughter at all. Her daughter wouldn't act like that. I brought someone to you that I like, and I want to marry him, you know. Not now, not right away, maybe a little later, when the feelings between us are stronger. I just want to explain to you, Father, that I'm not at all attracted to Jacob. I don't need him. I'm much better and more sincere with Jonathan than I am with your Jacob. Dylan grinned. Marry that simpleton. How long have you two known each other? Let me find out. Amelia could barely stand her father's gaze. It is not important. I am the father. I'm asking, when did you two meet? We met recently. What does it matter? Do you hear what I'm telling you? I want to marry him. Just like that. What's he like? Did you see him? He's a pauper. I can smell it a mile off. How can he provide for you and meet your needs? What can he give you? And he's lame. Haven't you noticed that? Amelia, why are you doing this? Why are you crippling your life? I want to set you up so that you'll never need anything. And you're putting me on the spot now. So you've made a choice. I take it. Father, listen to me. Answer my question. Will you not marry Jacob? Do you want to be with that guy you brought into my office? No, I'm not marrying Jacob. Yes, I want to be with this guy. Do you finally understand that? Shouted Amelia. Did it not occur to you that this guy only wants your money? No, he's not like that. He didn't know I was rich until I told him myself. What are you talking about? You said it yourself. You don't look like you're not poor. I don't think he's stupid at all. He looks smart and cunning. So, my dear, you are the stupid one in the midst of it all. Amelia cried out. That's not true. I am not stupid. Why would you say such a thing? And he doesn't care about my money. I know that for a fact. We talked about it. There was silence. Dylan didn't say anything back to his daughter. They stared at each other for 2 generations. And then Dylan's face changed. He said quietly to his daughter, well, if he's so good, then live with him. Move in with him. Let him provide for you now. Pack your things and go with him right now. Just don't expect any more help from me. I'm not going to provide for you anymore, give you money or do anything for you. You understand me. You made your choice. I accept it. But you knew the terms. You knew what was waiting for you. You and I have nothing more to talk about. Amelia turned pale. He threw her out of the house. He means that in all seriousness. How could he? And where is she going to go? He knows she has nowhere to go. She and Jonathan have known each other less than a week. Is there any connection between them? No, she's nobody to him, and he doesn't have to answer for her. She's just going to end up on the street. If one of her friends doesn't take her in, she'll just end up on the street, and it would be a long time. Amelia knew how long, until she agreed to marry Jacob. Only then would all this bullying stop. Can't you do that to me? I can briefly, my father answered. Amelia raised her head proudly. All right, have it your way. I'll do as you say. And she went to the door. As she reached for the doorknob, Father said, Oh, Amelia, you could at least find a rich fiancé. At least he would have supported you. But you chose a beggar. What will you do with him? He's no good for you at all. Amelia froze, and without turning to her father, answered him sadly. I am very sorry that you did not understand anything. If Mother had been alive, she would have made you understand. But when your mother died, something died in you too, and I understand that now. Maybe you'll understand it later. Maybe you'll never understand it. I feel sorry for you. Dylan didn't say anything, but his eyes grew moist. Amelia didn't see it, though. She left, closing the door behind her. Dylan stared after her for a long time, pondering her last words. When Jonathan saw Amelia, he knew something particularly unpleasant had happened. Amelia had told him everything. She was ashamed of her father, but she couldn't keep quiet. I can't believe he did this. He threw me out. I didn't think he was capable of that. I thought he'd get mad and calm down, and that we'd somehow come to a compromise. It's unbelievable. How can you do this to your only child? Okay, I'm gonna call my girlfriends. I'm gonna have to stay with one of them for a while, just until my dad and I work things out. You're going to help me carry the things. Jonathan nodded affirmatively. However, Amelia was in for an unpleasant surprise. None of her close friends could accommodate her. Amelia had one friend turn her down because their fathers were on good terms, and she feared that Dylan's anger would fall on her. Another friend was in Europe. Another was just living with her boyfriend now, and she didn't want an outsider in their lives. And another friend was just gloating because she had been jealous of Amelia for a long time. She said so many nasty things to the girl, as if she had been waiting all her life for the moment to do it. Anyway, without her father's money, Amelia was of no use to anyone. She cried tears of resentment. She realized that she did not even have anyone to support her in difficult times, and that made her very hurt. And then Jonathan said quietly to her, "If you want, you can come to my place. We have a place. We can always feed you. Mama won't mind. She's always helped other people, and she'll be glad to help you. Don't you worry. I won't claim anything. And don't give me any thanks. Live as long as you want. No one will throw you out. Then we'll see what you do next." Amelia looked at Jonathan and marveled at his kindness and unselfishness, and she agreed. She immediately packed several suitcases of her belongings. It took her about 2 hours. Then she laid out all her bank cards on the table in the hall. She only took some of the savings she had with her. She still had some cash in her wallet. And without saying goodbye to her father, she left with Jonathan in a cab to his house. I must say that Jonathan's mother was just a delightful woman. She accepted Amelia without any questions. She just looked at her son carefully. After all, he hadn't even told his mother that he was coming with a guest. When he brought Amelia's suitcases home, Caitlin frowned as she looked at the girl's belly, but her son hastened to reassure her. "Mom, this is Amelia. She's a very good friend of mine. She has problems with her father. She is being forced to marry a man she does not love." Amelia refused, and her father kicked her out of the house. She has nowhere to live. No one wants to help her because her father won't help her financially, and I want to help her. She'll stay with us. "Okay, you don't mind us." Caitlin smiled. "What would I mind if a person needed help? Don't we have enough food for 3 people? There's enough for all of us." "Of course you do, daughter." "Oh, Amelia, I'm sorry." "It's all right. You can call me daughter. I don't mind. I don't have a mother. She died when I was little. I'm happy for someone to call me daughter. If you don't mind, of course." Caitlin fluttered her arms. "Oh, what a pity. Of course I don't mind. Well, let me show you where to set up. We don't have much room, but you'll be comfortable, believe me." Jonathan's mother gave the girl her workroom, where she usually sewed, stitched, and painted. It was her personal workroom. There was a small couch where Amelia could sleep. Caitlin quickly cleaned up, taking all the extra stuff away with her embroidery and cutouts. All that was left was the sewing machine, which could replace Amelia's dressing table. All evening the girl tried to go through her suitcase to get the things she needed. She looked at her dresses at a loss, which she had taken along with the hangers. Where to put them now? Where to hang them? And anyway, what are they for? Where to wear them? And with whom? And what she was thinking when she gathered her things. She set the dresses aside in one suitcase, opened another filled with jeans, t-shirts, and sportswear. These were the kind of clothes she could definitely use. From now on, she'd wear nothing but these. Good thing she had plenty of sneakers too. As time went on, now Amelia was almost a member of her new family. Jonathan worked on his tractor and Amelia spent the rest of her time with him. They were outside in the vegetable garden together. At first, Amelia just watched him work, what he did. She was amazed at the ease with which a lame man could do the work. And always he smiled and was friendly, no matter how tired he was. Amelia was falling more and more in love with the guy. She had already forgotten about the quarrel with her father. He didn't call her, and she didn't call him either. The girl was becoming convinced every day that she had never met a stronger, gentler, kinder, and more loyal guy. There was only one flaw in Jonathan. If you could call it a flaw, he had no money. He was poor. But even that absolutely ceased to bother her when she became convinced of how many virtues he had. One day Jonathan had almost fallen down the stairs while he was climbing on the roof to change a rotten tile. When Amelia saw him trying to catch his balance, She even screamed in fright and then clamped her mouth shut. When Jonathan came down to the ground, she jumped up to the guy and hugged him with all her strength. "What is it, Amelia? What are you afraid of?" Laughing, Jonathan asked, not knowing how to react to her embrace. "I was scared. I was very scared, and I was afraid that I would lose you, that something would happen to you. I was so scared for a few moments, as if I were on the verge of death myself. If something happened to you like that, I couldn't." Amelia couldn't finish what she'd started with the feelings that came over her. Jonathan's lips trembled, and then he hugged Amelia tightly to him. They stood there with their arms around each other for a long time. Caitlin wanted to hang the laundry outside, but when she saw the two of them, she smiled enigmatically and went inside. The laundry could wait. Spoiling such a moment, however, was absolutely not an option. As she hugged Jonathan, Amelia realized that she couldn't live without this guy. She loves him so much that she doesn't care about the whole world, and she is ready to live the life she will have if she ties her life to him forever. And don't care about her father. She truly loves him. And let the whole world wait. And then Jonathan moved slightly away from her, took her face with his hands and kissed her. And they kissed for a long time, standing right in the middle of the yard. Then Jonathan said quietly, "I love you." Amelia smiled, closed her eyes, and pressed her whole body against the guy again. "And I love you," quietly she whispered. That same night, they became close, and it was the best night of Amelia's life because she spent it with the man she loved. Caitlin realized that there was really one more person in their family now, and she was happy for her son because Amelia, though she was not adapted to life, was a good girl. They lived modestly. They ate the most common food. Amelia was not used to this, but she liked the way Caitlin cooked. She could make dishes out of ordinary produce that you'd want to serve in a restaurant. In fact, the dishes were quite ordinary. It was just that Amelia was used to eating food from restaurants, and she had never tried it. Plov, the usual dumplings, nutria stew, real Russian borscht, fried potatoes, and everything was a mystery to her. Amelia didn't know how to cook, so she watched with amazement as she nimbly worked with her hands. Jonathan, Caitlin's mother, watched the girl with a smile. "Do you want me to teach you how to cook?" Amelia was frightened to deny it. "Oh, Caitlin, I'm afraid it's useless. I look at you and realize that I'll probably never learn this science. You're so good at it. I can't even hold a knife. I can't even peel a potato. I can't do anything. You think everyone can do it all at once. You start with the easiest thing. Just try peeling potatoes." Amelia looked at her long-nailed fingers. She couldn't even hold a knife in her hands. No, she has to get rid of her nails first. She wouldn't be able to get a manicure now anyway. Then why does she need those claws? "All right, I'll do something first, and then I'll try it tonight." Caitlin smiled. This girl will do well. She will learn everything quickly, and she will be a good wife to Jonathan, if they ever decide to get married. And Caitlin knows in her gut that it's coming. Dylan was sitting at his desk in his office. He frowned, tapped his pen on the desk, and kept looking at his watch. He had made an appointment with someone, and he couldn't wait for the appointment time to come. He sighed and rubbed his eyes with his hand. How tired he was of being nervous, afraid, angry, worried, and hopeful. His daughter was causing him all the range of feelings a man could have, and there was nothing he could do about it. He had lost 5 pounds since Amelia had left home. He grinned bitterly. Who was he kidding, though? She hadn't left on her own. He kicked her out, and he hadn't heard from her in 4 months, and Dylan couldn't take it anymore. He had to find out everything. At first, he'd been sure his daughter would return quickly and bow at his feet. He was sure she wouldn't last a week without his financial support. He was sure she wouldn't be able to change her way of life. As she drove away with her belongings from the house, his driver followed them. He knew that his daughter had gone to this guy's house. Then he realized she wasn't kidding when she said she liked him. This big early guy she really liked. What if fate is evil? You'll love a go too. But Dylan thought that life in an ordinary little house on the outskirts of town would quickly bore his daughter, and she would just come crawling in, begging her father to marry her off to Jacob. However, things had gone awry, and Dylan was about to find out how his daughter was doing and what she was doing. His relationship with David was strained. It was Amelia, or rather, the uncertainty associated with her absence, that was the reason. David asked his partner only once, "What about our proposal, Dylan? Is your daughter still thinking it over?" Dylan honestly explained to his partner that his daughter had gone into voluntary forced exile, and until she accepts her fate, until she understands what is best for her, until she obeys her father, she will not return. David liked this method of parenting. "I told you, partner, you have to beat the crap out of her. I think you're on the right track. Way to go, Dylan. Way to go. You're gonna be fine. You'll see." But Dylan already doubted that his parenting methods were working on Amelia. She had grown up to be an unusual girl. It was as if she were not his daughter. Of course, he understood where it all came from in her. She was very much like her mother. Only Amelia didn't know that, because she barely remembered her. At last the hour of rendezvous had come. Dylan made himself comfortable in his chair. A few minutes later, Dylan's driver came into his office to see you. "I thought you were expecting him, wasn't he?" "Let him in." A man of short stature entered the office. He was young enough, but his sly and keen eyes betrayed a real professionalism. He was a private detective. "Sit down, Alexander, sit down." Dylan pointed to a chair for him. Alexander sat down, looked around, then smiled politely. "I'm listening to you." "Dylan, I am so glad that you contacted me again. It means that my services are really satisfactory to you." Dylan grimaced. Several years ago, he had already contacted Alexander. He suspected his partner of cheating, so he put him under surveillance to make sure he was wrong. Then his suspicions were not confirmed. Alexander carefully researched, tracked, and investigated. And Dylan trusted him. Yes, more than satisfactory. "And this time I need you to follow one person, or rather, I need you to find out all about her lifestyle. What she does, where she goes, how she dresses, with whom she associates. Everything. I need to know absolutely everything about her, down to what she eats, what she does at home, and who she sleeps with. If she's not sleeping alone, you can arrange that." Alexander looked intently at his potential customer. "I wonder if there will be something more serious here than the last case." Alexander particularly liked such cases, digging into other people's personal lives, and dirty laundry gave him an almost aesthetic pleasure, especially when he found something particularly repulsive in other people's lives, some secrets that compared people to the earth. He liked getting into other people's hearts, learning other people's secrets, being the bearer of those secrets and secrets. "So you can arrange it," Dylan repeated once more. The detective smiled slightly and replied in a sly way, "Of course I can. It's part of my duties. Only I need a little more information, at least full name, age, nationality. Anything I can think of. You must keep track of my daughter." "Alexander," Dylan said quietly, "you have to hand it to the detective." If he was surprised, he did not give himself away. Not a muscle flinched in his face. He simply nodded and waited. Dylan listed him all the information he knew about where she now lived. What was the name of the guy who had helped her? The man's particulars. He told him everything, and the detective carefully wrote everything down in his notebook. 15 minutes later, Alexander slammed it shut. He flicked a pen and put it in his pocket. "Well, it's very clear to me what you need. I don't think I'll have to look into everything for a long time. I'll call you in a week to report the first results of the surveillance." Dylan had not been at ease all week. He thought more and more about his daughter every day, and he became more and more convinced that he needed some way to convince her that she should leave everything and marry Jacob. 5 days later, he got a call from a detective. He said he was already ready to provide complete information about his daughter and her life. A couple of hours later, Alexander was already in Dylan's office. "Well, tell me soon. I'm listening to you carefully." The detective smiled. He had a phenomenal memory. All the information he laid out on paper in every detail. This folder he gave to Dylan. Alexander, however, recounted everything in words from memory as well, and he didn't leave out a single detail. "Your daughter lives with a guy named Jonathan and his mother. He is 30 years old. He doesn't have a father. He left them a long time ago. The guy has never been involved in any fights or illegal activities. All he did was work and home. Served in the army, then learned to drive a tractor. He's working. Caitlin. His mother works at home. She embroiders, sews simple clothes to order, does the garden. Simple and humble people. Nothing special. Your daughter lives with them all this time. She doesn't go out much. She doesn't see her friends. If she goes out, it's only with Jonathan. They act like a couple in love. Your daughter helps the boy's mother with the vegetable garden. And she does it willingly and with pleasure. She's happy. She can't be. She lives like a normal person. And she's happy. No, that just can't be." Alexander frowned slightly. "Are you questioning my credibility? Are you questioning my competence? Look at the folder. There are pictures in it that will convince you that your daughter is quite happy." Dylan shook his head. "No, I don't doubt you. I doubt my daughter. Thank you for the information. I'll be sure to look it over." Dylan took a stack of bills out of the drawer and slid them to the edge of the table. "That's enough." The detective took the money and politely said, "That's enough. Thank you for your cooperation. As always, the information obtained and our relationship will remain top secret. The guarantee of secrecy is the main component of my work. Good day." And the detective left, and Dylan thoughtfully leafed through the folder with a puzzled look at the pictures, from which his daughter was looking at him. She really was smiling and looked happy, but she looked different on the outside too. A tracksuit doozy on her head, with no makeup on her hands soiled in the ground. Amelia and dirty hands are incompatible. What had happened to her? And Dylan realized he had only one option. He must go to them to see for himself. He must see for himself what is happening to his daughter. He must see for himself whether she has changed so much. What does it look like in the pictures? For a couple of days he pondered whether or not to go. Then he decided he couldn't put it off any longer. He decided to call his daughter. When he dialed her number, he didn't expect her to answer, but she answered her father. "Hi. Hi, Amelia. How are you?" "I'm fine. Honestly, I'm glad you called. I've been wanting to call for a long time myself, but I didn't know whether you'd answer or not." Dylan felt tears come to his eyes. How much he missed her. "I am Amelia. I'm so sorry about what happened with us. I wish I could come and meet you, come and see me." "You're sure?" Dylan was sure, because it was the only way he would know the truth about his daughter's life. See everything with his own eyes. "Yes." Amelia. She was surprised, too, that her father wanted to see her at Jonathan's house, but she decided to go along with him. And she said he could come even today. An hour later, Dylan was already outside Jonathan's house. He looked at the old house with disdain. Yes, and this is where his daughter lives. I wonder how she can be so happy in the pictures the detective provided him with. The gate opened and Amelia looked out. "Hello, Papa. Come in." Dylan looked at his daughter in amazement. She looked much younger than her years. She was wearing an apron, and it was all stained with flour. When he entered the house, Jonathan came out to meet him. "Hello, Dylan. Welcome to the house. I'd like you to meet my mother. This is Caitlin." Dylan said hello to the woman, who smiled embarrassedly at him. Amelia invited him to the table. "A few more minutes, and it will be ready." Enigmatically, she told him. Dylan contemplated the humble furnishings of the house. Everything was so shabby to him. However, he couldn't help but admit that it was clean and tidy. There were no unpleasant extraneous smells anywhere. It smelled like baked goods, as if something delicious had been cooked recently. A few minutes later, his daughter brought a pie dish into the room. It had just been taken out of the oven. "Daddy, it's apple pie. I made it myself. Caitlin taught me. And I made it the first time. Can you believe it? I had to get rid of my nails, though. I couldn't handle the dough with them. But I don't regret it. I'm just now realizing how comfortable it is without them." Dylan looked at Amelia. The detective didn't lie. His daughter was happy. She was happy without his money. She didn't need them. She lasted so long without his financial support because Jonathan was working. He supported the whole family, giving them the most basic shelter over their heads, food on the table, communication, and Amelia had enough of that. She didn't go out to restaurants anymore, preferring to be with Caitlin, who taught her how to cook. Never would Dylan have sat down at a table in such a poor house, nor would he have touched such a pie that was made with his own hands. But he was so shocked by what was happening that he could not refuse a cup of tea. Anthony hit the brakes, but they couldn't stop all the way. They hit a pedestrian. Dylan saw that it was a woman with a baby in her arms. He and Anthony couldn't make a sound out of horror. A few seconds after they hit them, Anthony hit the gas, and they sped forward. "What are you doing, Anthony? We hit people. We shouldn't leave the scene of an accident. They need our help. Get back here right now. You're sick. If we killed them, we go to jail. You understand? My father will kill me. And if they're alive, if they need help, if they tell us who hit them, your car will be wanted. They'll find you anyway, and we'll go to jail. If your dad doesn't kill you first." Anthony was driving anyway. "I'll think of something else. Don't worry." And he did. He confessed everything to his father. His father didn't kill him. He just sent him off to Europe. He got rid of the car right away. That's why nobody in town ever saw that bright blue car again. Dylan and Anthony were never contacted again after that accident. And 5 years later, Dylan found out that Anthony had been killed in an accident. He exceeded the speed limit and drove into the oncoming lane. Whether by accident or on purpose, no one knew. But Dylan knew one thing: this accident never left either of them alone. Anthony was simply the culprit. He was more to blame. Dylan was just an accessory and never told anyone about the accident. No one else knew about the accident, and Dylan continued to carry this mystery around with him, knowing that for the rest of his life, he would agonize that these two men died because of their fault. They were not dead, however, but were sitting before him now. He had spent most of his life feeling remorse for not having done anything then. And now he has a chance to make things right, but not to make things right, but to ask for forgiveness, and maybe that will make him feel better. And this eternal pain would disappear that had been tormenting him all the time. "Daddy, are you not well?" Amelia asked. Dylan woke up from the memory. He looked at his daughter. "You just haven't said anything for 5 minutes, and you look pale. You don't feel well?" Amelia asked again. Dylan shook his head. Then he looked at Jonathan and his mother. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Jonathan and Caitlin looked at each other. "I'm sorry for what?" "I don't understand," Caitlin said. "I'm sorry again," Dylan whispered. Everyone was silent, looking at each other. Then Dylan covered his face with his hands. "Daddy's going to get you a doctor. I don't understand what's wrong with you. Daddy, don't scare me. I'm afraid for you. I don't want to be without my father too." Dylan took his hands away from his face and took his daughter's hands in his own. "And I'm sorry for everything, for treating you this way, for not understanding you, for not wanting to listen to what you want. And I'm sorry for what I'm about to say." He turned to Jonathan and Caitlin. "I'm sorry that you're going to have to sink back into these horrible memories now, but I must tell you everything. For so many years I've agonized, and now I can confess everything. Because I've met you, I can see that you don't understand anything. I speak in riddles, but you will understand now. Please, hear me out to the end, and then you can say what you want to say. If you chase me away and they fight back, if you call the police, I'll wait here patiently for them. If you curse me, I will agree with you, and Dylan told them all about the accident. He confessed that he and a friend were the ones in that bright blue car, and they were the ones who made Jonathan limp. He told them everything, not hiding a single detail. And he told them about his former friend's death, too. Everyone was shocked by what they heard. Caitlin was crying. Jonathan sat upright. He was pale and serious, and Amelia clasped her hands over her mouth in horror at what was about to happen. When Dylan finished his story, there was a sepulchral silence. He waited for the verdict, looking at his judges. But it was impossible to tell from their faces what they were thinking. They looked like statues. And then Caitlin moved. She turned to her son. "Jonathan, what do you think of this?" Jonathan looked at Amelia. The girl was in tears. She looked at her father with horror. And then she turned her gaze to her lover. She finally took her hands off her mouth, but she couldn't say anything. Jonathan looked at the girl he loved so much, and he knew that no amount of trouble could make him give her up. Yes, her father had made a terrible mistake in his youth. But in fact, he wasn't the one who had caused the accident either, and the culprit himself had paid for what he had done a long time ago. Jonathan hoped that this guy was tormented by remorse until the very last minute. Jonathan sighed and took Amelia's hand. "Don't cry, my love. Everything will be all right. The worst is over. Don't be afraid. My attitude toward you will not change, because I love you madly." Then Jonathan looked at Dylan. "I forgive you. I don't hold a grudge against you. Thank you for confessing to me. It made me feel so much better to know that the person responsible for that accident was killed. What about you? You were just sitting there. No, you crippled me. And if you had confessed then, maybe I never would have met your daughter. I love her very much. I'm glad you came clean after all these years." Dylan was shocked. It was the first time he had ever met such a noble and kind man. God, it's just unbelievable. "Amelia, you chose the best man there is, and I bow to you. You were right. And yes, your mother wouldn't have done that. She would have wanted you to be happy, and she would have talked me out of making mistakes. I just forgot what a beautiful woman she was, and you reminded me of that. Thank you, daughter." Everyone forgave each other, and the four of them sat in the cozy little dining room for a long time. And Caitlin fed Dylan her signature pilaf, and Dylan admired her culinary skills too. And then Jonathan spontaneously asked for Amelia's hand. And the girl cried again for a long time, because too many events were piled on her in one evening. So Dylan agreed to Amelia and Jonathan's marriage, but he put only one condition that the boy must abide by. "I want to fix something. I'm partly to blame for your limping. I want to help you. I'll send you and Amelia abroad, and they'll examine you and do the necessary tests. If an operation is possible, I will pay for it, and I want you to get well. And when that happens, you can marry Amelia, and I won't dictate terms anymore. You will live as you wish, but know that everything I have, it will all belong to Amelia." Jonathan resisted, but she talked him down. She was so caught up in this surgery idea, and she believed it would work, and it did. Jonathan also had the surgery 6 months after he left Russia. He came home completely healthy. Dylan helped Jonathan's mother the entire 6 months. A month after their return from Europe, Jonathan and Amelia got married. The wedding was modest. There were only the bride and groom and their parents. Dylan looked at his daughter and was very sorry that his wife couldn't see this moment. "Mom would be proud of you if she were with us now." Amelia smiled and hugged her father. "She can see us, Dad, and she's proud of you because you've become the best father in the world." After the wedding, Dylan thought about changing the scope of his business. David stopped being his partner as soon as he found out that Amelia really wasn't going to marry his son. But Dylan wasn't upset. He had an idea he was going to discuss with Amelia, Jonathan, and his mother. Everyone liked the idea. And after that, Dylan sold his part of the company to another partner, and he started to prepare to start another business. He was now going into the restaurant business, and all four were to become full partners. It worked out even better than they all thought it would. They opened their first home-cooked restaurant. While at first it was a small cafe, 6 months later it became the most popular place. All the customers were thrilled with every dish and rave reviews were pouring in from all sides. And now it was a full-fledged restaurant. They were expanding and improving all the time. There was a lot of work for everyone. Caitlin was in charge of the kitchen stuff. Dylan was in charge of the financial side of Amelia. She was in charge of designing and decorating everything. Jonathan was in charge of getting the best products. He knew almost all the people in the nearby villages, and they had the best and freshest everything in their restaurant. And they were a great success. Their restaurant was written about in the newspapers, and people came to interview them. And Dylan refused to give one himself. All 4 of them answered the journalist questions, and Jonathan proved himself to be very good. Dylan's son-in-law proved to be very clever and quick-witted. A year after opening the restaurant, Dylan realized that he could safely leave his entire fortune and the business to his daughter and her husband because they can easily dispose of it as they need it, and he doesn't have to worry about anything else. His daughter will be in good hands.